Hi, and welcome back. If you've been following the recent series, I'm working on the Grundig 2147, and I wanted to try something. I wanted to try my external BFO on this to try and decode SSB. Now, this project, this one is one I've done a series on, and I've got some videos. I'll link the last one, the last video on this project up above if you're interested. Radio Cruncher, Graham, just did a video where he builds one of these online, and he gave away one of the boards as a kit and so on. And I got curious. I wanted to see just how easy this thing would be to work on, to put it to work on a different radio than the one that I originally designed it for, which was for the Grundig Satellite 2100. Now, the Grundig Satellite 2100, I've done, again, another series, which I can link above. And I got this thing working quite well on the amateur bands. Now that thing's got a band spread. Now, band spread, if you don't know what it is it takes a part of the band and it stretches it out. In other words, if you've got shortwave, let's say, well, like in this case, we've got shortwave going from about 5.5 megahertz all the way to 15.5 megahertz. So there's a hell of a lot. There's 10 megahertz along there. And that 10 megahertz is achieved by turning the tuning condenser. I'm not quite sure how many times you turn this. Let's see. To get the full range, the tuning condenser knob will turn, let's see, 1, 2, 3, just 3.5. It literally turns 3.5 times because it's geared, but 3.5 times on that tuning condenser to try and tune across 10 megahertz is quite a challenge. So you'll pick up the big stations, the strong stations, and you'll hear them, and you can pinpoint them, and you can sort of fiddle a bit and fine-tune it in there. But you really don't have any fine-tuning. You don't have any band spread, which the satellite does. What the satellite does is it takes, within the shortwave band, you usually have a small section that's called a commercial band. It's usually the 21 meters, the 31 meters, the 49 meters, 41 meters. So within that band is where the commercial stations usually operate. Now it takes those bands and it makes it extend across the whole dial. So all your tuning condenser turns apply only to that range, which actually allows you to fine tune into the stations. Now, on some of the radios that I've restored, I know the Sabas do that. They call it KW loewe-opta, I think it is. It's KW is shortwave. What they're trying to say is that it's like a magnifier, so you magnify into that portion of the band. Now this thing doesn't have that. In fact, to get through the, for example, the 40 meter band for the amateur radio, 40 meter band, it's like half a twist. Just a twist. I'm not talking about a turn, just a little, like a millimeter twist on the dial, and you're right through it. Which means that if you want to find a Donald Duck voice on there, which is what transmissions sound like when they are transmitted in sideband, upper sideband or lower sideband, you cannot do that. I mean, I managed once, right? So what I decided to do is I wanted to create a band spread. Now, I'm not going to fit a band spread onto this radio. I wanted to basically mess around, try out the BFO, the external beat frequency oscillator, to get to decode that single sideband SSB, and I wanted to be able to adjust very finely the frequency, the tuning. And the easiest way to do that, this is not new. This is me farting around. The easiest way to do that is to actually adjust the oscillator capacitor. Now, if you remember the rather long description on the IF alignment that I did in the last video, the actual condenser, the tuning condenser, has two sections. One is for the front end, one is for the oscillator. The front end captures a station region, and the oscillator changes the frequency, and then it basically transfers through the difference between it and the IF frequency, so you tune into your station. Yeah. Now, to do that, if I can just, the front end is not that important, but the oscillator frequency is extremely important. if I can make very small changes to the oscillator frequency, I can tune to a small part of the band. In other words, I can get more resolution in my tuning. Not with the standard tuning condenser, but with a capacitor that I'm going to attach to it, which is going to add to it. But add a very small amount. In other words, if your condenser is halfway and these things are about, I think they're 500 picofarads each section. So let's say it's at 250 picofarads. And if I add, say, 10 picofarads, one way or the other, then I can make a very small change in that frequency. And that's what I want to do. So what I decided to do is to take an old tuning condenser and adapt it to work on this. So this is what I've done. I've taken a tuning condenser. This is one of these air tuning condensers I've had lying around here for some time. These have two gangs or two sections. They're both the same value. This one seems to be bigger, but it's the same value. It's got to do with the spacing of the fins. And I've taken one of them and I've added a small capacitor to it. Now, the reason you see two capacitors, I'll explain in a second. But what I've done is I've taken that capacitor. The one point, the common point is ground. It's the chassis ground. So that's it there. So that comes off on this crocodile clip, the black one. And the red one comes off very simply. It's got a 10 picofarad capacitor in series with the output of that capacitor. In other words, I've created two capacitors in series, one with the other. The 500 picofarads in series with 10 picofarads. And if you see, that's where that goes off. All right. Forget about that. That's just sort of holding it in place. So I've got 500 picofarads in series with 10 picofarads, and that goes off to this one. Now, that means that best case, when I've got this capacitor fully ganged, I've got 10 picofarads in series with 500 picofarads, which will be about 10 picofarads, okay? When I've got it fully open, I should have 10 picofarads in series with 0. Not that it does get to 0, but 0. So that should be 0 picofarads, okay? Now, whatever capacitor I put across the oscillator section of the tuning cap on the radio is going to add to it, okay? So the idea is that if I put it there, then I should have about 5 picofarads. And if I tune with the normal tuning condenser to a station, I can then add a little bit or reduce a little bit in capacitance, and I can tune around the point that I've set the main tuning on. What it means is that the actual dial pointer becomes a little bit less meaningful because this does shift it, of course, but it does allow me to fine tune, and I'll show you exactly how that works. I'll also show you where to connect this in. Now, this thing is ground, and that is because the tuning condenser has one section grounded. We know that from the schematic. This one, you've got a clip across the tuning condenser that applies to the oscillator. On this radio, it's over here. Coming out of there, there's the hole on the chassis. That tuning condenser point, that connected to the tuning condenser, then connects to this capacitor. And I clip to that point there. Okay. Move this aside. Lay the radio down, and then I'll just clip this to the chassis in an appropriate point, and I think we're ready to test it. I want to test it on a shortwave station. Before I start testing it, I'll just explain what this switching is all about. This thing has 10 picofarads coming in from there. That's where the red wire is connected to the middle of that switch. That's also where the 10 picofarads is connected, and that's connected to the cap. I've then got a 22 picofarad also connected to the cap, which goes to that side of the switch. So that if I do this, I can get 32 picofarads. If I do that, I get 10 picofarads. In other words, I'm putting that 22 picofarads in parallel with that 10 picofarads, so that I'm getting 32 picofarads in series with the condenser itself. And the reason for that is that if I want to use this on medium wave 10 picofarad tuning just doesn't do much because the medium wave band is actually relatively small compared to the shortwave band. So I need sort of 32 picofarads. With the effect of this condenser, I get some fine-tuning ability. But the good thing for this is actually on shortwave, so I'll leave it on 10 picofarads. There's no mystery there. It's just two condensers that are going in parallel. So here we go. I've got shortwave on. I've got the mini whip antenna in, of course. I've got this at the moment on the 41 meter band. And if we go across here, see, there are quite a few stations very, very close together. If you see just how much I'm changing this. Well, watch what happens when I use this thing. And of course, that was in the center, so I can go the other way as well. So anywhere I go on here, see if we can find a weaker station.
I da vezme ST30 po srednje evropskom vremenu na 5000 über 700 Jahren. Die Herstellung eines Paares erfordert 32 nur natürlich.
Now that's with 10 picofarads. Now if I give it 30 picofarads, the range will increase. This will change around as well, the dial pointer. But the range that I'm able to swing across increases as well.
Für die Schuhsohle. Stoffsonnen. Sie sind zum Station.
You see that? For me to get to those three stations, there's one. Very difficult, even when you get on it, to fine-tune it. And here's another example. You've got two stations very close together, which I cannot distinguish between with that knob there. But watch this. So there we go. We've added band spread to our 2147. Not very practical once you put this thing in the case, but that's not the point. I was just playing around and I wanted to see just how far I could move this. Now, I do know, and I've tested this with the signal generator, sending a signal out. On 10 picofarads, I'm getting about 400 kilohertz range. In other words, if I tune to 6.5 in the middle, when I put that condenser in the middle there, then I can go about 200 kilohertz to the left, 200 kilohertz to the right. That's just something I measured just to see where I was. Now, the reason I wanted to use this, as I said, was to tune into single sideband transmissions, which are on usually the 20 meters and the 40 meter band. I don't know whether we'll get anything right now. But one of the ways that I get it is I take this thing, this is my BFO, the external BFO, and put it on. Now I've connected it to the antenna connector. So I'm actually feeding a a carrier at the IF frequency, which happens to be 460 kilohertz. And if I have it on, it's on low, usually I can hear it a lot better. I can pick stuff up a lot better. Let's get this thing over here. Ideally, this thing should be in a case because just going near it, you're changing the capacitance. See, you can't hear anything there, but if I give it a tone, there is something there. Come on, talk. So, three things are important. One, you have to have a signal coming from your transmitter, whoever's transmitting it, that is strong enough for your receiver to receive in the first place, okay? Doesn't matter what level of BFO you feed it, if the signal's weak, it's going to stay weak. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to understand what language they're speaking, which sometimes is a bit of a challenge. Over here, I get a lot of Portuguese and, well, not so much Portuguese, more Spanish, some English. And the other thing is you've got to be interested in what they're saying, which is usually not the case, but that's not the point. This is a scientific exercise. And, you know, when you listen to this, no offense to amateurs, radio amateurs, but it seems that everybody spends a lot of time telling each other what antennas they're using. And I suppose if I was a radio amateur, I'd probably do the same. But that's besides the point. The point is you can now fine tune into that signal. You can then feed in your carrier and adjust the frequency. What this BFO does is it produces a frequency, a carrier, at the IF frequency of the radio, which in this case is 460 kilohertz. This is adjustable, but it was set for 460 because the satellite 2100 is also at 460. But you can adjust it to 455 or 470, whichever you need. You do that inside by opening the bottom, and then you set that to the middle, and you get 2 kilohertz or 2.5 kilohertz either way, so you can decode either upper sideband or lower sideband. And it works pretty well. I'm going to wait for a little bit longer, and I'm going to record a few attempts at this when the bands become a little bit more active. They really are dead right now. And you'll see what I mean. And I think it's cool. I mean, this is totally impractical. You can't put this into your radio. This is another bloody tuning condenser. This thing sticks on the outside and just connects to the aerial, to the antenna at the back. But it's just for fun. That's what this was all about. And I've got to warn you, be careful. There's live voltages in there. Be careful what you're doing. You need to know what you're doing or you could zap yourself.
Okay, Martin.
Wow. I am so shocked. Thank you for the information, and he will be in my praise, Martin. K2TRD e 3BEM.
Ist schon wieder Silvester. Und dann schauen wir mal, wie das hier weitergeht. Im Augenblick, glaube ich, gibt es gerade ein bisschen Panik wegen den Engländern und dieser furchtbaren Mutation HI, die wahrscheinlich jetzt in Kürze überall auftauchen wird. Das wird jetzt da gerade ein bisschen hochgespielt, als wäre das ein reines englisches Problem. Also hier hat man auch schon ein bisschen was mitbekommen, ja, weil wir halt
Top 6 serve citofono in tutte le the second ending in Juliet Queen and the Juliet Quebec. Vamos a ver, ahora estoy pensando, ahora hace frío, en la temporada sirve para proyectar y para pensar. Después cuando empieza la temporada con un poco más calor, vamos a intentar. Si se puede hacer o no, José, esto es todo. Muy bien, muchas gracias, José, de esto hermoso QSO. Espero de encontrarte otra vez para charlar del tema aquí de la antena. Un fin de año y un próspero año nuevo para ti y tu familia, José. Completamente. Por eso las vueltas, se ponen nuevamente en un elemento y bueno, se ponen en un mástil estudiando y luego esa la opción de ponerla en vertical o ponerla en horizontal normalmente, ¿no? Funcionan las dos maneras, funcionan muy bien.
So there we are. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And I'll see you back soon with another video in the series, the 2147 restoration series. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Stay safe and Happy New Year.